So this is the second video in the decision-making series, and we're going to start off with step one of this rational decision-making process. And like I said, this process is a tool for helping us bring some rigor to the act of making a decision, with the hope that by doing this, by bringing in that rigor and that discipline, we can increase the likelihood that we will make better decisions, that we will move toward optimization, in other words. And the first step is identify the problem. And on the surface, that may seem like, I don't know how that might seem to you, but from when I first think about it, I think, well, duh, of course, identify the problem. I mean, is that even a step? I mean, the problem is why you have to make a decision in the first place. So isn't the problem self-evident? Isn't it very apparent what the problem is? And what I hope to convince you of is that, no, actually, this is arguably one of, if not the most difficult steps of the decision-making process because of how tricky it can be to really identify a problem. So what do I mean by identify the problem? There's a couple of things that I want to call your attention to. The first is asking yourself when you're faced with a problem, what type of problem is this? You know, is this another way to look at it is to say, is this, we can break this into a couple of categories. Say, is this a problem that I've seen before? Or is this a new kind of unusual, unexpected, novel kind of problem? So a problem we've seen before we would call programmed. This is a programmed kind of decision. You know, I deal with the same problem every day, and I know how to solve it because I've solved it 100 times in the past. So when you're really dealing with a problem that's familiar and that there's very clear answers to, you don't really have to waste your time with this whole process. You know, you can just kind of skip ahead to implement the solution that you already know because you've done it before. Just go ahead with it, right? And we make tons of program decisions every day. You know, what way am I going to take to get to school today? You know, or to get to my work today, or you know, where am I going to sit in the classroom? You know, we do what we always do. You know, like basic stuff. These are not high consequence decisions. These are pretty simple. The non-programmed ones are the ones that require our time and attention. These are the ones that are novel, that we maybe haven't been in this situation before. Or maybe we have, but we didn't. There's something really unique or different about this situation, where the answer isn't clear, isn't obvious, isn't easy to just draw from the past and reapply here. So it's these non-programmed, more challenging, more high-stakes decisions that we really want to pay attention to this model. Because this model can be kind of cumbersome, and you don't want to, and it takes time to enact it really well. So the idea here is to say, try to you know, choose your battles here, and try to save your energy for the decisions that really matter. So differentiating between when do I really need to sit down and think this through versus when do I not is really a key first step. And of course, be careful here, because sometimes people encounter a situation that they think is a situation just like ones they faced in the past, and so they treat it as a program decision without realizing that there's something unique or different about the present situation that requires more thought. And so you can get tripped up here if you make the wrong assumption about what decision you're facing. So this is first one part of identifying the problem. We're figuring out what type of problem is it, programmed or not, and then acting accordingly. Now, assuming you're dealing with a non-programmed decision, a more novel, high-stakes, unclear way forward, that's when identifying the problem takes on a new, there's another aspect to this identify the problem that's really important to consider. Are you sure that what you're dealing with is really the problem? Or are you being distracted by something that's not truly the issue, right? I don't know if you've had, for those of you that have a significant other or been in any kind of long-term relationship, and you get in an argument with somebody, and you know, let's say you forgot to grab the mail on your way into the house, or you forgot to pick somebody up at the time that you said you were going to, and you were a little late, and then it turns into this big fight, right? And you're like, well, I mean, you say, well, what's the big deal? I mean, I know I'm late, and I'm really sorry, and I apologize that I was late. And you find out really quickly that the argument, the big situation that you're dealing with is not really about you being late. It's about something else. It's not that you were late. It's that you're just overall irresponsible, or I overall just don't feel like I can count on you, or I just don't trust you, or whoa, okay, so this is a big problem. This is something. This is just that me being late was just this nothing, right? That just set it off. But there's really something much more significant going on here, right? Well, that's what I mean by when you're dealing with the problem, are you dealing with the real problem, or are you dealing with just the superficial stuff that seemed like the problem, but it's really not? So we would say that we want to try to differentiate the symptoms from the underlying issue, the thing that's really giving rise to those symptoms. So think about it medically, right? If you get a headache, what do? Most of us, when we get a headache in our daily life, we just want to solve that problem. How do I get rid of the headache? Okay, maybe I'll drink some water, or maybe I'll get some rest, or maybe I'll take some Advil or Tylenol or whatever, or I'll get some sleep and it'll go away, right? No big deal. Headache goes away. Next couple days later, you get another headache. Got to do the same thing. Drink some water, get some rest, eat some food, take some medicine, whatever. Let it go away. Get another headache. You keep doing the same thing, right? What are we doing in that situation? What's causing this headache? Well, we don't know. We're not really paying attention to it. We're just trying to throw a bunch of solutions at it and hope that something solves the problem. Maybe we're dehydrated. Maybe we're hungry. Maybe it's just stress. Who knows? We're not really trying to figure out what's causing the headache. We're just trying to make the headache go away. So we're treating the symptoms, generally. In our daily life, that's what we do. We treat the symptoms. We're not trying to figure out what's really causing them. Eventually, this could be problematic. Eventually, we might say, wait a minute, what's causing these headaches? And maybe it's really severe. Maybe it's really significant. For some people, there's a lot of kinds of, like chronic malnutrition can cause headaches. Or dehydration, chronic dehydration can cause headaches. Or some physical abnormality inside of your head or your body can cause headaches. And obviously, if something like that is going on, wouldn't you want to know about it and try to solve that underlying problem rather than just sort of treat the symptoms and mask that underlying problem? That's why we go to doctors. We go to doctors to say, hey, here's my symptoms. What's going on? What's really the issue? And if the doctor's doing their job, they'll try to ask you questions and conduct some tests maybe and try to figure out what's really at the heart of this so that we could treat that. The idea is if you treat the symptom or the underlying issues behind the symptoms, it will make the symptoms go away, but it will do it in a way that's much more sustainable. That's not going to make the symptoms likely to just resurface tomorrow. So think about Ralph Stay at Johnsonville, right? He's got employees who are driving forklifts into walls and spraying water all over their product and making these careless mistakes. Well, a manager could come right in there and treat that as the problem and say, these workers, I got to do something about this. Maybe if I incentivize them more to not make mistakes, they'll stop making them. Or maybe if I just fire the workers who mess up, that'll send a message and people will stop doing it. He's making real assumptions about what the problem is. And he's treating the behaviors of the employees themselves as the problem. Now, what Steyer did was he actually said, wait a minute, maybe these mistakes are actually symptoms of a deeper problem, of something else, of something more significant, something more comprehensive. It's not just individual employees making mistakes. There's a deeper pattern here that gives rise to this irresponsibility. And it's when he started to peel back the layers that he said, wait a minute, there's something about my management style, in fact, that might actually be contributing to people making mistakes. So the key to Ralph Steyer making changes at Johnsonville was that he was willing to look past the symptoms and identify a deeper underlying problem or problems that he thought were at the heart of all of that. Now, obviously, if he hadn't done that, the whole story would be very different. But because he was able to do that, he was able to make changes at a very deep level that had ripple effects through the whole organization and ended up alleviating the symptoms. Very difficult to do because it means peeling back those layers, asking some tough questions. Why is this happening? What's causing this? So if you're asking those kinds of questions, why and what's the cause and what's at the heart of this, then you're really exploring the underlying issue. If you're not, then you're not really dealing at the deep level of the decision. So when you go back to the decision of where should I go to school? Should I go to Western? Should I go to UW? Well, that's the issue, but it's not really the problem. Why does your choice matter? Why does it matter what school do you go to? Are there certain things that you want, that you value, that you want to address? If you really dig into what your core underlying problem is, are you concerned about what's going to help you make the most money in the future? Are you concerned about where you're going to have the most satisfying experience? Are you concerned about which school is going to have the right kinds of majors and courses of study for you? Are you concerned about social activities? What's really driving this decision? What core issues are at the heart of this superficial decision of where do I go to school? if you don't get to that level, then you're just kind of rolling the dice and hoping you choose something that works out. You're not really getting to that core problem. Now, I want to show you why identifying the problem can be difficult. And maybe you're already seeing like, wow, okay, this takes a little bit more work than I thought. But I want to say, even if you buy into this and you say, okay, I get it, I got to really look for the core problem. I want to try to make the point that even when you get it, that you should be oriented towards solving the problem, that there are things you're going to face that are going to make it difficult to do. And so let's start here first with an awareness test. So watch this video, follow the instructions as you watch, and see what you think.
How many passes does the team in white make? The answer is 30. But did you see the moonwalking bear?
So I don't know if you saw the moonwalking bear, and some of you probably did. I've shown this video to a lot of people over the years, and this video has been shown to a lot of people independent of me over the years, and different versions of this video has been shown to many, many, many hundreds of thousands and probably millions of people. And most people don't see the bear the first time. And in fact, if you're really doing your job and counting the passes the white team is making, you shouldn't see the bear. Some of the reasons people see the bear is because they're not really trying to solve to answer the question. They're more just kind of lazily watching the clip. But if you're really doing what the clip asks you to do, most people don't see the bear. And even if you saw the bear in this video, if I showed you different videos like this, you're going to miss some of the bears. So why is that? It's a good question to ask yourself. What does it mean that we miss the bear? Now, this video is actually used in the UK to sort of as a public awareness message for bike safety, to say, like, as a driver, if you're not looking for something, you might miss it. So if you're not looking for cyclists on the road, you might not see them and you might hit them. But this phenomenon that we don't see what we're not looking for is pretty significant. I mean, like, actually visually not see it. It's a good thing. It's a good thing that we don't see it, but in some ways, but it's also problematic that we don't see it. So we'll use this as the first of several decision-making errors and biases and information processing errors and biases that we have that will affect the quality of the decisions that we make. The way we process and absorb information affects our ability to make sound, effective decisions, because if the information is flawed and our decisions are based on that information, well, then the decision is likely to be flawed. And so one thing we can look at from this clip is this idea of selective perception, or even selective attention, that we have a tendency to screen out information and see our environment only or primarily in ways that we think it pertains to us and is consistent with what we expected to see. So you don't expect to see a bear in this clip, so you tend not to see the bear in this clip. And in fact, you're actively working on a task that is better performed by screening out information pertaining to the bear, because the bear is black and the team in black is not a team you want to pay attention to. So you're screening out certain kinds of information to perform your task better. And in doing that, you don't see the unexpected. You don't see the weirdness of this bear. Now, like I said, this is normal. It's good that we can do this. If we were not able to screen out information, we would have problems. You would never be able to multitask or go into a class and listen to somebody with other noise going around you. The fact that you could have a conversation with somebody in a noisy coffee shop shows how good it is that you can screen out irrelevant information and focus on what's before you. But sometimes this causes problems for us, because sometimes there's information present that wouldn't it be nice to have noticed it? Are we really well served by screening out the bear? I mean, wouldn't you want to know that there's a bear present in your environment? So we have this tendency to screen out information to help us better focus on the task at hand. But when we do it, we miss information that may be inconsistent with our expectations, but that might be important. And so that means we can take this one thing and factor it back into the challenge of identifying the problem. Well, this suggests a broader implication of this is that it can be challenging to identify problems sometimes, because sometimes the problem, to see the problem, we have to pay attention to information that's different than what we expect. So the bear here becomes the analogy, the metaphor of of information that's contrary to or outside of our typical realm of awareness. That if we notice it, might lead us to identify the problem differently. So Ralph Steyer could easily view his workers in a certain way because of the mistakes that they're making. But one of the bears in that case might be his own management style. And if he's not open enough to see that, to see how his management style might be affecting them, he'll misidentify that core problem, right? So that's one problem or one challenge that makes identifying the problem difficult. Our lack of true openness to all information in any situation. And again, this is a reason actually why premature decision making, why focusing too quickly on the outcome before you thoroughly analyze and identify and analyze the problem is really problematic. A lot of times we don't identify deliberately and analyze the problem, and so we end up skipping ahead to just making a decision, and we didn't fully incorporate a lot of information into that process. The attribution process is important here as well. So the attribution process is explained in detail in your book, and I'm not going to reiterate it here. I'll just say that attributions are about how we determine the cause of why something happened. And we'll talk about attributions for people's behavior. So we can make attributions for our own behavior, or we can make attributions for other people's behavior. And the question is, why did somebody do what they did? Did they do it? And there's two real broad explanations. You either did what you did because of something about you, something intrinsic to you, some sort of internal reason, or you did it because something situational, something contextual or environmental. And in theory, consensus, distinctiveness, and consistency, three things talked about in your book, should drive our conclusions, to determine whether we think something is likely caused by an internal factor or an external factor. So if a coach wins the game, you're likely to, based on, well, does this person tend to win lots of games, and do other people in that kind of situation tend to win games, and all that kind of stuff factors in. So should we say that was luck, external, or skill, internal? Right? How did you do on the exam that you took? How will you attribute your performance? Did you do well because you're smart, or did you do well because you're lucky and the exam was easy? If you see you did well because of your intelligence, that's an internal attribution. If you think you did well because it was easy, that's an external attribution. Why did somebody else get the promotion? Did they get it because they're talented, or because they just happen to be in the right place at the right time? That's the second one is external. The first one is internal. So that's how we make attributions all the time. The problem with attributions is that there are some predictable errors in how we make attributions for our own and for other people's behaviors. The first predictable error is so fundamental, it's so common, that it's called the fundamental attribution error. And you may have encountered this in social psychology or other psych class, because these are psychological research that has generated these understandings. The fundamental attribution error is our tendency to overemphasize internal characteristics when evaluating the cause of somebody else's behavior. So whenever we see somebody else do anything, we're more likely to attribute it to internal reasons than we are to external reasons. And that's true whether they do something well or not well. So when the team wins the game, we're likely to credit the players as really talented, or the coach is really skilled, or the team captain is making really solid decisions, or whatever. We're likely to make internal attributions. If the team loses, we're likely to make internal attributions again. Oh, the team was, they're not skilled, or they underperformed, or they made bad decisions, things that are really internal. When we see somebody else, a CEO of a company that's doing well, we're like, wow, that's a really talented CEO. When the company's doing poorly, like, what's wrong with this person? They're really not talented. We tend to really over-attribute the causes of other people's behavior to internal factors. Now, the other kind of bias that we exhibit is called a self-serving bias. And this is about attributions we make for ourselves. When we evaluate our own behavior, not always, but often, our tendency is to come up with internal explanations that explain our successes and external explanations that explain our failures or our shortcomings. So this would be like, if you're trying to say, why did I do well on that test? Well, the self-serving bias says you're likely to say, well, it's because I'm smart and I'm hardworking and I'm a good student. Those are all internal explanations to explain your own success. But if you didn't do well on a test, you're not likely to say, it's because I'm stupid or because I'm not hardworking or because I just don't get it. You're more likely to say, well, the test was unfair or the test was too hard or some other kind of contextual, not your responsibility explanation for that. And again, it doesn't always play out. I mean, sometimes people will actually over-attribute internal reasons for failures, but by and large, people tend to want to put themselves in a positive light. So we explain away our shortcomings by blaming them on the environment, and we sort of give ourselves credit for the things that we do well by saying it's something intrinsic to us. So take, for example, imagine you're driving down the freeway, okay? You're like in the middle lane of the freeway. There's somebody on the left of you and you're approaching an exit, and this person, all of a sudden, as you get close to that exit, speeds up, cuts right in front of you, and zips off the exit, right? And it's like shocking to you. It's scary because like you're on the freeway, you're all going really fast. This suddenly happens. You're like, oh my God, what kind of thought goes through your head about that person? How do you attribute that person's behavior? Is that an internal attribution or an external attribution you're likely to make? And if you're like most people, the first thought that'll come to mind, the PG version of it at least, is what a jerk, or what an awful driver. And those are internal attributions. You're more likely to attribute that person's behavior to their overall, this is a bad person who just did this thing to me. This is an irredeemable, flawed individual, right? You don't think, well, maybe they're really late. Maybe there's a woman in the car who's about to give birth and they really have to get over there and this is an emergency. You don't think about stuff like that. Your first and immediate reaction, and often the only reaction, is this person's a jerk. Now imagine a different situation. You're on the freeway, you're in the left lane, somebody's in the middle lane, an exit is coming up, you're running really late to a very important job interview. And if you miss this exit, the next exit's not for 2 miles, you'd have to turn around, come all the way back, you're for sure going to be late. And that's a bad first impression to make. So you've got to make this exit, but you didn't realize how close it was. So, oh my God, I got to speed up and cut off this person. I'm so sorry. You give a little wave, and you cut off the exit, and you go. You just cut this person off, right? How do you attribute the causes of your own behavior? Do you say, I'm a jerk? Probably not. But even if you did, you would say, I'm not really a jerk. I just did maybe a jerky thing in this moment. But I'm really a good person. I had to do it because I was running late. And I even waved to try to make it nice. And of course, the other person's viewing you saying, what a jerk. This person cut me off, and now they're even waving at me about it. But you're giving yourself a free pass here. You're explaining away your behavior to the situation. The situation made you do it. You wouldn't normally do that. It was just what you had to do given the situation. So you give yourself the benefit of the doubt. We don't tend to give other people the benefit of the doubt. That's how the self-serving bias is at play for explaining away our failures or our shortcomings. But when we judge other people, we're more likely to attribute the internal characteristics to them. So obviously, this is how we understand the causes of events. If we're biased in certain ways, then we're not likely to always attribute the causes of events properly. So take again Ralph Stayer at Johnsonville. Workers are making mistakes. His natural tendency, our natural tendency, would be to blame those people for their mistakes. Now, of course, he ends up not doing that. He ends up actually stepping back from that and saying, wait a minute. Maybe there's another explanation. But his default reaction would not be to do that. His default reaction would be to blame them and to actually say, well, it's clearly not my management style because self-serving bias, I'm doing fine. Or if there are problems, it's because of the environment, because I have lousy workers, not because of me. So he actually had to counteract both of these biases to arrive at a real, true understanding of the cause, the underlying problem at Johnsonville. And that is not easy to do. We do not do that unless we are active and mindful about the information that faces us, aware of these biases and willing to act contrary to them.